In a forgotten mountain town where nothing ever changes, one quiet mechanic lived his days hidden behind engines in silence, until a little girl appeared out of the woods barefoot and alone with a story that didn't add up. What began as an ordinary morning turned into a life neither of them ever expected, and a connection that would change far more than just two lives. This is not a story of heroes in capes. It's a story about kindness, timing, and how sometimes the smallest decision can ripple further than we ever imagine. So settle in, take a breath, and if you enjoy stories that heal the heart and stir the soul, don't forget to subscribe for more tales just like this one. Let's begin. A mechanic marked a lost child on Google Maps hours. Later, a helicopter landed beside his garage. The morning fog lay low across the sleepy mountain town of Ashford, Colorado, a place so small it rarely appeared on state maps. Wedged between jagged pine-covered ridges and meandering dirt trails, Ashford was where people came to disappear or to mend. Eli Dawson wasn't running from anything anymore. He had simply stopped moving forward. His garage, Dawson's Auto and Repair, sat at the edge of town, just past the faded gas station, and across from an old rail track long since swallowed by weeds. The building was a relic: cracked siding, dented tin roof, and a hand-painted sign so weathered that only locals still recognized it. Inside, everything smelled of motor oil, steel, and a quiet kind of grief. Eli stood over the open hood of a rust-bitten '92 Ford, sleeves rolled up and hands slick with grease. The muffled sound of classic country floated through a dusty radio mounted to the wall. Johnny Cash, mostly static. It was how Eli liked it. Predictable, faintly nostalgic, uncomplicated. At 46, he was a man who had traded ambition for peace. Once a firefighter in Denver, Eli had seen things that no amount of time or bourbon could erase. There had been a fire, a collapsing roof, a child too far inside the smoke. After that, there had been nightmares, the weight of guilt, and eventually the silence. So he left. He came back to Ashford, inherited the garage after his father passed, and never really looked back. Eli tightened the final bolt beneath the hood and reached for a rag when he heard it, the soft, irregular crunch of gravel. He paused, frowning. Customers rarely arrived unannounced, especially on foot. He stepped outside, wiping his hands, eyes adjusting to the fog-blurred morning. There at the edge of his lot stood a child, a little girl, no more than 7 or 8. She wore a thin, dirt-smudged jacket that hung off her frame, and her hair, dark brown and tangled, clung to her cheeks like cobwebs. Her knees were scraped, her face pale, and her bare feet were red with cold. Eli's throat tightened. "Hey there," he said gently, taking a cautious step forward. "Are you all right?" The girl didn't respond. Her eyes, wide, unblinking, stayed locked on him, as if unsure whether to run or stay. She looked like she'd been walking for hours. He knelt slowly, keeping his voice low. "My name's Eli. This is a garage-safe place. What's your name?" A pause, then barely audible, "Maya." "That's a pretty name," he said. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head just once. "Is your mom or dad nearby?" Another pause. "Then Mama's sleeping in the car." Eli's brows drew together. "What car?" She turned and pointed a shaky little finger in the direction of the woods behind his property. It went off the road. Mama didn't wake up. The words hit him like a cold slap. Instincts kicked in, vestiges of his rescue days. He scanned the tree line. There were old dirt trails back there, mostly used by hunters and teens looking for trouble. Nothing anyone should drive on this time of year. "Okay," he said softly. "Thank you for telling me, Maya. Let's get you warm first, all right? Then I'll see if I can help your mama." She hesitated, then nodded. Eli extended a hand. After a beat, she took it. Her fingers were like ice. Inside, he grabbed the emergency blanket from his shelf and wrapped it around her shoulders, then poured water into an old kettle and set it on the electric burner. He stirred cocoa powder into a chipped mug left over from a Christmas years ago and handed it to her with both hands. She cradled it like it was the first warm thing she'd held in days. While she sipped, Eli stepped outside again, phone in hand, raising it toward the sky. No signal, not even a flicker. He walked toward the edge of the property where sometimes, if the wind blew, right, a single bar might flicker. Nothing back inside. Maya sat silently, eyes staring down into the mug. Do you know how long you were walking? He asked. She shrugged. It was dark. Then it got light. His stomach turned. If there really was a car crash in those woods, time could be critical. He fired up his computer. The internet was slow but usable. He opened Google Maps and zoomed into the stretch of forest behind the shop. There were no roads, but he marked the area Maya had pointed toward as best he could. He dropped a red pin, clicked add a label, and typed, possible car crash, child found nearby, limited access, need immediate response. He added a short note in the description. 7-year-old girl found alone claims mother is unconscious in car off trail. Coordinates approximate, then he clicked save. A long shot, but some emergency response systems now integrated with real-time data and flagged crowdsourced alerts. It was something. And right now, something was more than enough. When he turned back, Maya was curled up on the ragged couch near the wood stove. Eyes closed, the mug clutched in her lap. Eli stared at her for a long time, heart heavy. He hadn't had a child in his home since ever his life had no room for such things. No rhythm for it. But here she was. And he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had brought her here, it wasn't done yet. The midday sun began to slice through the fog, casting thin streaks of light across the gravel in front of the garage. Eli sat on the porch swing with his second cup of black coffee, its steam curling upward into the mountain air. Inside, the little girl was still asleep on the couch wrapped in a quilt that had once belonged to his mother. He couldn't stop glancing toward the forest. Maya's words echoed in his head. Mama's sleeping in the car. It went boom. He had marked the location on Google Maps, but with no cell signal, and the local sheriff's office 2 towns over it felt like sending a message in a bottle. And the bottle was drifting in fog. After a moment of pacing, Eli made up his mind. He scribbled a note and left it on the table beside the warm cocoa. Then he grabbed his first aid kit, a walkie-talkie from the old emergency set, and his flashlight. Slipping on his jacket, he stepped into the woods behind the garage, tracing the vague direction Maya had pointed. The path was rough, narrow, sloped, overgrown. Few people used it anymore, except maybe a hunter in the fall. He moved quickly but carefully, alert to every sound. About 40 minutes in, he spotted something unnatural, crushed brush, a deep tire, rut, a shimmer of chrome in the ravine below. His stomach turned. A black SUV lay on its side, crumpled against a boulder. One door had been thrown open. The windshield cracked like spider webs. An airbag hung limp. Blood had dried on the fabric of the driver's seat. Maya's mom, he called out. Can you hear me? No answer. He moved closer, checking inside. The back seat booster was empty. No one was in the car. No sign of the mother. He took a few photos and noted the GPS coordinates for when he could finally send them. Then, without wasting time, he began the trek back. The garage was too quiet. He pushed the door open fast. Maya, no response. His pulse quickened. Then he saw her crouched near the edge of the lot beside the old doghouse. Jasper used to sleep in. Her arms were wrapped around her knees. Her eyes stared out toward the trees. Relief swept over him like a wave. He walked to her slowly. I found the car. He said softly. No one was there. But we'll figure this out, okay? She nodded. Just once. What's your mom's name? He asked gently. She hesitated, then answered. Charlotte Lennox. Eli froze. That name, everyone knew that name. Charlotte Lennox, founder and CEO of Cygnus Technologies. One of the most powerful women in Silicon Valley. There had been articles, magazine covers, even rumors of a previous kidnapping threat 2 years back. And now her daughter was sitting barefoot beside his garage. He knelt beside her, careful not to spook her. And your name is Maya Lennox. Yes, she said. But Mama says to never tell people that. Not unless it's safe. Why were you out here? We were going to our cabin in the woods. Mama said it was safer than home. But the car slipped on the road. She hit her head. I tried to wake her, but she didn't move. So I climbed out and walked. She said it like it was nothing. Like bravery was a natural thing for a 7-year-old. You did the right thing. Eli said, I'm proud of you. She looked down. Is she okay? I don't know, he admitted. But we'll get help, I promise. That night, after stew from a can and toast from his old camping skillet, Maya curled back up under the quilt she had eaten in silence. No questions, no tears. Just a quiet resignation. No child should have to wear. Eli sat in the corner, laptop open, trying to pull up any trace of her. No recent photos. Charlotte Lennox was known for guarding her child's privacy. But Eli did find something, a headline from 2 years ago. Cygnus Tech CEO involved in alleged kidnap threat, daughter kept from public view. He leaned back, exhaling. It explained the silence. It explained the caution. And maybe why no one had come looking yet. If someone wanted Charlotte Lennox out of the picture, they might want it quiet. No police. No headlines. His gut twisted. He looked over at Maya, asleep now, hugging a stuffed bear he'd pulled from the old lost and found box. She didn't know it, but her world had already shifted. So had his Eli Dawson had lived alone for a long time. But something had cracked open in him the moment she said thank you before drifting off, and neither of them had any idea what kind of storm was already heading their way. The wind changed that morning. It came down from the mountains, colder, sharper. Eli noticed it the moment he stepped outside. The trees along the ridge swayed gently, whispering things the valley hadn't heard in years. Inside the garage, Maya was stirring. She'd slept through the night again, still curled tightly on the couch, still clutching the stuffed bear. Eli had covered her with a second blanket around 3 a.m. after being jolted awake by a dream he couldn't quite remember. He poured himself a cup of instant coffee and stood at the garage door, squinting up at the cloudy sky. He didn't expect what came next, a sharp ping from his phone. He blinked, startled, then snatched it from the workbench. A single bar faint. But there, the GPS had locked in. His message sent from Google Maps the day before had gone through. He held his breath and refreshed his inbox. Nothing yet, but the pin he dropped was now live. His note, possible car crash. Child found nearby, was visible, publicly marked in red. He didn't know who would see it or when, but now it existed somewhere beyond these mountains. It was real, a thread cast into the chaos of the wider world. A minute later, another ping. This time a text. Unknown number, is this Eli Dawson? This is Homeland Emergency Operations. You reported a child. Please confirm. Eli's heart began to pound. He quickly typed back, yes, her name is Maya Lennox, age 7. Says a mother was in vehicle crash. Coordinates approximate SUV located, driver missing. The response was almost immediate. Understood. Do not move the child. Secure location response en route. Then another text, ETA, 90 minutes, expect aerial arrival. Aerial, Eli stared at the words. His garage hadn't seen traffic in days, and now a helicopter was inbound. He turned slowly toward Maya. She was sitting up now, rubbing her eyes, hair sticking up in every direction. She looked smaller in the morning light. Morning, kiddo, he said gently. How are you feeling? She shrugged. Okay, hungry. He smiled. Good, I can fix that. As he fried up eggs and toast in the cast iron skillet, he spoke over his shoulder. Hey, Maya, someone's coming to help you and your mom. She looked up, who I'm not sure yet. But I think they know who you are. She paused mid-bite. Will Mama be okay? Eli softened. I hope so. We're going to find out soon. After breakfast, they sat in the lot together. Maya on an old milk crate, Eli on the porch steps. The wind carried a distant mechanical hum, so faint it was almost a whisper. Then gradually the sound grew louder. Whump, whump, whump. Maya looked up sharply. Is that? Eli stood scanning the sky. And then it appeared emerging over the ridge like something out of a movie. A black helicopter, sleek and matte, bearing no visible markings. It hovered for a moment, then began descending directly onto the open gravel lot beside the garage, sending dust and pine needles spiraling into the air. Eli stepped in front of Maya instinctively. The helicopter touched down with surgical precision. The moment the blades slowed, 2 men in black suits stepped out, one wearing a comms earpiece, the other with a silver case in hand. They didn't look like regular responders. The taller man approached. Mr. Dawson. Eli nodded cautiously. I'm Agent Harlan, Department of Homeland Security. This is Agent Reese. We're here on behalf of Charlotte Lennox. At the sound of her mother's name, Maya clung to Eli's leg. She's alive, he asked quickly. Yes, Harlan said. She was located about 5 hours ago near the crash site, unconscious but stabilized. Maya let out a breath she'd been holding for 2 days. Her face crumpled. Eli crouched down beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She's in medical care now, the agent continued softer. She was asking for her daughter. And you found us because of the map pin, Eli asked. Harlan nodded. It flagged our system. Certain names carry automatic alerts. You probably don't know this, Mr. Dawson, but you just saved someone very important. Eli shook his head slowly. She's a little girl. That's all I needed to know. The agents exchanged a glance. We'll need to debrief you briefly, Reese said, and there's a private transport en route for Maya. If you're willing, Ms. Lennox requested you accompany her daughter back to the hospital. Eli blinked. Me? She says Maya trusts you? Maya tugged at his jacket. Please come. Eli hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Let me grab my jacket. The helicopter took off 20 minutes later. Inside, Maya sat beside Eli, head leaning against his arm. She was too tired to speak. He glanced down at her heart, heavy and strange. He'd lived alone for years, but now in a matter of hours his life had tilted on its axis because he'd chosen to listen to the quiet knock of a child on his edge-of-nowhere world. As the mountains fell away beneath them, Eli Dawson wondered for the first time in a long time where the road might lead next, and whether he was ready to follow it. The hospital was unlike any Eli had ever seen. Glass walls, quiet halls, private elevators. No waiting rooms full of coughs and fluorescent buzz. Everything smelled sterile, but somehow still too quiet. Like the kind of place that wasn't built for the public. They landed on the rooftop just after noon. Maya clutched his hand the entire way down her fingers, small but determined. She didn't say a word as they walked through corridors, guarded by men in suits, faces like stone. Eli didn't ask questions, he just held on. A nurse, no name tag, sharp eyes greeted them outside room 312. She's stable, minor concussion, some bruised ribs. She's been asking for her. Maya, the woman said, not unkindly. Maya didn't wait for permission. She slipped from Eli's grip and pushed through the door like a leaf caught in wind. The room was warm, soft beeps pulsed from a monitor. Charlotte Lennox lay propped up in a hospital bed, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, an oxygen tube resting lightly across her nose. Her eyes flicked open the moment Maya entered. Mama Maya, the woman's voice broke on the first syllable. She opened her arms and the girl rushed in. Eli stepped back, unsure if he should be there. But then Charlotte looked past her daughter. Her eyes landed on him, sharp, unreadable, and something in her gaze softened. She mouthed something he didn't catch, then whispered something into Maya's ear. The girl nodded, then turned. Mama wants you to stay. Eli hesitated. The room felt too clean for a man who still smelled faintly of grease and pine needles. Charlotte spoke, her voice hoarse but firm. Mr. Dawson. Please. He stepped inside quietly and took the chair in the corner. The nurse closed the door behind him. Maya crawled beside her mother, laying her head gently against her shoulder. Charlotte stroked the child's hair in slow, steady motions. There was a silence then, not awkward, but reverent. The kind of silence that wraps around people who've come too close to losing something they love. Finally, Charlotte spoke again. You found her. Eli nodded. She walked out of those woods, he said. Right into my garage. You fed her. Kept her warm. You marked that pin. Charlotte's eyes misted, but her tone stayed composed. Most people wouldn't have bothered. Or worse, called the press. I don't like cameras, Eli replied. They're too loud. She managed a tired smile. We have that in common. Another long pause passed. Then she asked, Do you have children? No. Eli said simply, Never married. Her eyes flicked to Maya, who was now asleep again, curled at her mother's side. She talks about you, Charlotte said. Told the medics you made her cocoa. Let her sleep with your dog's old blanket. She needed kindness, Eli said. That's all. Charlotte studied him carefully. It's not a small thing. Kindness. Not these days. He didn't answer. He didn't know how they stayed like that for almost 2 hours. Every so often a nurse would check in. At one point someone brought Charlotte a tablet and whispered about press containment. She waved them off. Eli didn't ask questions, he simply sat. Around 4 p.m., Charlotte stirred. Maya needs rest and so do I. But before you go, he stood expecting thanks or a formal goodbye. Instead, she said, I want to offer you something. Eli frowned. Ma'am, I don't want anything. This isn't charity, it's possibility. She gestured to the side table where a folder sat. That's a proposal. Something I've been developing for a while. A non-profit project repair and rehabilitation for veterans. Single parents, small-town folks who can't afford service on what gets them to work. He stared at her. I need someone who understands engines, she continued. But more than that, someone who understands people, who sees them without judgment. You have that. Maya saw it too. Eli shook his head slowly. I'm not built for boardrooms, Ms. Lennox. This isn't a boardroom offer, it's a garage. Your garage, we fund it, you run it. No branding, no strings, just do what you do for more people. He stared at the folder but didn't reach for it. Just read it when you're ready. She added softer now. Maya thinks the world of you. That means more to me than all the investor portfolios combined. That struck something in him, not pride, not flattery. Something older, belonging. Okay, he said at last, I'll read it. Charlotte smiled. It was the first time he saw her, not as a titan of industry, but as a mother, exhausted human. Grateful. Thank you, Eli. He nodded once and turned to go. But before the door closed behind him, he heard Maya's small voice call out. Come visit again. He looked back. I will, he said, and for the first time in years he meant it. Back in Ashford, everything looked the same. The mountain air was sharp with the scent of cedar. The old rusted sign still creaked in the wind. The tools on the workbench hadn't moved, and the radio still crackled with country songs from decades past. But something inside Eli Dawson had changed. He stood at the edge of his gravel lot, hands on his hips, staring at the ridge where the chopper had disappeared 2 days before. A piece of paper, Charlotte's proposal, sat folded in his jacket pocket, untouched since the hospital. He hadn't read it. Not yet. Not because he wasn't curious, but because he wasn't sure who he was now. He'd spent years hiding behind spark plugs and oil cans, keeping the world at arm's length. He'd built a life with no questions, no risks, and certainly no one depending on him. But now a 7-year-old had called him safe, and her mother, a woman who could afford anyone, had trusted him. Eli didn't know what to do with that. He walked back into the garage and began cleaning. It was what he always did when thoughts threatened to push past his defenses. He swept sawdust that wasn't there. He oiled hinges that didn't squeak. He reorganized the same row of spark plugs 3 times. Still, he couldn't shake the silence. It felt different now, no longer peaceful, but hollow. By mid-afternoon, he was tightening a bolt under the hood of a customer's Jeep when he heard it. A low hum, faint at first, distant, but unmistakable. He stepped out from beneath the hood, eyes scanning the sky. A second later, the sound sharpened, rotors slicing through the mountain air. Another helicopter, but this one wasn't matte, black, or silent. It was deep green, military grade with the markings of a national emergency unit, and it was descending right onto his lot. Eli shielded his eyes from the wind as the helicopter touched down. Dust swirled. The dogs in town started barking in the distance. A door swung open. A tall man in a navy jacket stepped out. He wasn't dressed like a soldier, more like a statesman. Gray at the temples, calm eyes. 2 others followed carrying cases. Eli didn't move. The man approached with a hand outstretched. Mr. Dawson. Eli nodded warily, wiping grease from his fingers before shaking it. Name's Paul Hendricks. I work with the Office of Civil Response and Strategic Outreach. That's a mouthful, Eli muttered. Hendricks chuckled. Means we're the ones who show up when something unexpected happens, and someone does something remarkable. I didn't do anything remarkable, Eli said. A little girl walked into my garage. I did what anyone would do. That's where you're wrong. Hendricks looked around the garage, then back at him. Most people don't listen. Most people don't believe. Most people don't drop map pins that save billionaires' lives. Eli bristled. That wasn't why I did it, I know, Hendricks said simply, and that's exactly why we're here. He gestured to one of his assistants who opened a case and handed Eli a thick envelope and a silver medallion etched with a symbol. Eli didn't recognize. "What's this?" Eli asked. "Commendation," Hendricks said, in a formal acknowledgement. "Quiet like you probably want." But real Eli stared at the envelope. "I didn't ask for any of this." "We know," Hendricks said. "We also know Charlotte Lennox has made a sizable donation in your name to the First Responder Relief Fund and to Ashford's Volunteer Fire Department." "She said it was your idea," Eli blinked. "It wasn't," Hendricks smiled. "Maybe it was hers, or maybe she just knew it's where your heart lives." There was a pause. Then Hendricks said something that stuck. "You're not the kind of man who saves lives for headlines, Mr. Dawson. But the world needs to remember what that kind of man looks like." With that, the team packed up. The helicopter lifted again, leaving only wind and silence behind. Eli stood there a long while after the envelope in one hand, the medallion in the other. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. That evening, just as dusk crept in, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "She's doing better. Sitting up, asking for Coco. C.L." He stared at the screen. No emojis, no signatures, just 7 words. And they said more than most people managed in a paragraph. He typed back, "Tell her I'll make a cup soon." A minute later, another ping. "She wants to visit the garage." Eli exhaled slowly. Then he walked to the wood stove in the corner, started a small fire, and pulled out the proposal from his jacket pocket. The paper crackled as he unfolded it. At the top, the Dawson Initiative. "In honor of those who fix what others throw away." He sat down and he began to read. The knock on the garage door was soft. Almost hesitant, Eli didn't move at first. He was elbow deep in the engine of an old Chevrolet that hadn't run since the Reagan administration. His head was full of bolts, belts, and the rhythmic clink of metal on metal. The knock came again, 3 slow taps, then silence. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked to the door, expecting the mailman, or maybe old Jerry from the diner, looking for help with his busted snowblower. It wasn't either. Standing just outside in a navy wool coat and dark jeans was Charlotte Lennox. She looked out of place against the chipped paint and cracked concrete, not because of how she dressed simple clean, but because of the gravity she carried. The kind of gravity built from boardrooms, breaking points, and too many nights without sleep. And yet she looked softer, less armor, more human. "Hey," she said quietly. Eli nodded once. "You're up. I was discharged 2 days ago. They wanted me to rest in Denver. I told them I had somewhere else to be." He stepped aside, holding the door. She entered slowly, taking in the space. The smell of oil, the fading scent of pine smoke from the wood stove. The rows of tools hung like old friends. "This is it, huh?" she asked. "This is home?" Charlotte let her gaze wander. "It's nothing like my world." I figured. She turned to face him, but Maya talks about it like it's a castle. That made him smile just a little. Kids see things differently. She's not the only one. There was a pause between them, not uncomfortable, just full coffee. Eli offered, "Only if it's terrible." "It's awful," he confirmed, "but hot." They sat on 2 mismatched stools near the workbench. Eli poured the coffee from an old tin thermos. No cream, no sugar. Charlotte didn't ask. She sipped. "This is worse than hospital coffee." "I told you." A faint laugh, and with it, a piece of her fell away. They sat for a long while in quiet. Just the crackle of the stove and the occasional ping of cooling metal. Then Charlotte spoke again. "I came to say thank you, but I realized that's not enough. You don't owe me anything." Eli replied, "I disagree. You gave my daughter safety when I couldn't. You gave her warmth, Coco, a place to sleep. You listened when she needed a voice. She's a good kid. She's everything to me." Charlotte said, and I almost lost her. "I've spent years building walls around our lives, bodyguards, gated properties, encryption on everything. And still she ended up barefoot in the woods, and you, some stranger with a wrench and a quiet smile, saved her." Eli looked down. "I didn't save her. She found me." Charlotte nodded slowly. "That may be true, but it still changed everything." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folder worn now, corners curled. "The Dawson Initiative." She said, "You read it?" "I did." And Eli hesitated. It's good, real good. But I'm just a mechanic, Charlotte. I don't do vision statements, I do timing belts and brake lines. She leaned forward. That's exactly why you should lead it. He stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or shake his head. She continued, I've spent years in rooms filled with people who talk fast and say nothing. But when Maya talks about you, it's not your skill. She remembers, it's your stillness, your kindness. That's what people need, especially the ones who are broken in ways no wrench can fix. Eli said nothing, but something inside him stirred again. Familiar, foreign, frightening. Charlotte softened her tone. You don't have to give me an answer today or even tomorrow. But know this, I'm not asking you to be anyone else. I'm just asking you to be you for more people. Silence again. Then Charlotte stood. She's outside, wouldn't let me come alone. Eli blinked. Maya Charlotte opened the garage door with a smile. And there she was, standing at the edge of the gravel, holding a paper bag in both hands. Eli, she yelled, her voice bright like spring. He stepped forward. She ran, coat flapping behind her, and threw her arms around him. We brought donuts, she beamed. Mama said I could pick the flavors? Eli crouched to her level. Best news I've heard all day. She reached into the bag and pulled out a lopsided one with pink frosting. This one's yours. It's got extra sprinkles, I told the lady. It was for someone important. Eli blinked once, then smiled behind him. Charlotte stood quietly watching the two of them, her daughter and the man who had changed both their lives. No cameras, no press, no headlines. Just a cold morning in a quiet town, and the beginning of something neither of them could quite name yet, but both knew was real. The garage had never seen this much sunshine. Or maybe it had, but Eli was only just now noticing light filtered in through the skylight above his workbench, glinting off wrenches and socket sets like something holy. Outside, Maya laughed as she chased a pine cone. Jasper once buried, Charlotte leaned against the garage frame. Arms crossed, a soft smile playing on her lips. It was a Tuesday, but somehow it didn't feel like any Tuesday Eli had known in years. He turned back to the engine he was repairing, a Dodge Caravan with a bad starter, and tried to focus. But the laughter kept pulling him back. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong to wealth or status. It was just joy, uncomplicated, untethered. Real. Charlotte walked in and set a paper bag on the workbench. Lunch, she said. Sandwiches. Maya insisted yours had to have extra pickles. She's got a gift, Eli said, smiling. She thinks you're her hero. Eli wiped his hands and leaned back. I'm just a guy with a toolbox. Charlotte didn't answer right away. She picked up a screwdriver and examined it absently. You know, she said, the day Maya was born, I was on a video call with an investor in Singapore. I had to mute the line between contractions. Eli raised an eyebrow. She laughed softly, almost at herself. I was so obsessed with keeping it all together. The company, the image, the growth charts. I used to think success was measured by how many hours you could go without sleep. And now Eli asked, now I think success is getting to watch your daughter smear jelly on your leather seats and not even care. He chuckled. That's a high bar. I never thanked you properly. Charlotte said, you don't need to. I do, she insisted, but not with money or medallions. That's not what you value. I've watched you. Eli, you're someone who listens, who notices things others miss. He looked at her carefully. Why are you really here, Charlotte? She didn't flinch. I came to make you an offer, but not the one in the folder. He leaned against the counter. Go on, I want to partner with you. Not just fund your garage or name a charity after you. I want to build something with you. Real from the ground up, he blinked. You mean business, I mean purpose. She said, you know, machines. I know how to scale things. You fix engines, I fix systems. What if we brought that together? Eli hesitated. That's a lot to ask of a mechanic. It's not about what you do, it's about who you are, and the world needs more of it. There was a weight in the air, not heavy, but solid, anchoring. You think a woman like you can work out of a place like this? He asked, half joking. Charlotte stepped closer. A woman like me is tired of sterile boardrooms and people who talk in metrics. I want mornings that start with burnt coffee and the smell of pine. I want to build something that makes a dent in the world and not just in a quarterly report. Eli studied her, and then slowly he nodded. All right, let's say I believe you. Let's say I'm willing. What's the first step? Charlotte smiled. We start with one car, one story, one person we help, and then we let it grow. Just then Maya burst in through the door, cheeks flushed. Mama Eli, there's a bunny in the shed. They both laughed. Charlotte looked at him. You and Eli glanced at Maya, then back to Charlotte. Her eyes weren't cold now. They weren't calculating, they were open and hopeful. I'm in, he said. She reached out and they shook hands. It wasn't a contract, it was a covenant. That night Eli sat by the stove flipping through a notebook where he'd started sketching ideas. What the garage could look like, how to redesign the back bay into a teaching space. The heater rattled, the lights buzzed, and for the first time in years he didn't mind the noise. Outside the world was still what it had always been, but inside this garage, inside this man, something entirely new had taken root. Not just purpose, but possibility. The sky had turned lavender by the time Eli found Charlotte sitting alone on the tailgate of his old pickup. She was staring at the mountains, their silhouettes darkening against the last light of day. A thermos sat beside her, untouched. Her coat hung loosely from her shoulders, and the sharp CEO polish she usually wore like armor was nowhere to be seen. Eli didn't say anything at first. He approached quietly and sat next to her, leaving a respectful space between them. The metal beneath them creaked old and familiar. I forget how quiet it gets out here, Charlotte said, eyes still fixed on the distant peaks. It sneaks up on you, Eli replied. Then you start needing it. She nodded. I used to hate silence. I filled it with meetings, with news tickers, with voices. Thought it meant I was moving forward. But silence isn't emptiness, is it? No, Eli said. Sometimes it's the only thing honest enough to hold you together. She took that in. A long moment passed. The kind people either rush through or lean into. I told you Maya and I were headed to a cabin that night. Charlotte began, Eli nodded. That was true, but what I didn't say was, we were running. Her voice was even, but Eli heard the strain beneath it. There's a man was a man, someone I trusted. We built part of Cygnus together. He was brilliant, ruthless, charismatic. But I didn't see the darkness coming until it was too close. He began using his access, watching Maya making comments. Subtle things at first, enough to make you doubt your own instincts. Eli stayed quiet. Let her keep going. Then one night our driver found a GPS tracker under Maya's car seat. When I confronted him, he laughed, said it was for her safety. That's when I knew he wasn't just a bad partner. He was dangerous. She looked down at her hands. They were clenched in her lap. I bought the cabin under a shell name. Had the car packed by midnight. No press, no guards. Just the two of us. I thought I could keep her safe. Then the road gave out, and I woke up in a hospital with 6 cracked ribs and no child in sight. Her voice broke, just a hairline fracture. But enough Eli didn't touch her, but he sat closer. I failed her. Eli, all my resources, all my power, and still I couldn't protect my daughter. You didn't fail her, he said quietly. Charlotte turned to him, eyes glassy but defiant. Then why did she end up barefoot and cold, knocking on a stranger's garage door? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out at the mountains with her. I've pulled people out of fires, he said at last. Some I saved, some I didn't. But the ones that lived, they always remembered the hand that reached for them. Not the flames? Charlotte blinked. He added, Maya remembers you, and she remembers she got out. That says more than failure ever could. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Charlotte laughed softly, wiping her eyes with the edge of her sleeve. You always talk like that. Like what? Like you spent 20 years reading fortune cookies in the woods. Eli smirked, only the good ones. They both laughed, a quiet, surprising sound that wrapped around the evening air like a blanket. You know, she said, I've never told that story, not even to my board, not even to my lawyer. I don't know why I just did. Eli looked at her, gentle but direct. Maybe you needed to say it out loud to someone who doesn't need anything from you. Her gaze softened. You're wrong about that. He raised a brow. I think I need this place, she said. This air, this quiet, this reminder that not everything has to be war. Eli looked down at his hands. I've been at war with silence for a long time too, until Maya walked in and gave it a name. They sat in the dying light until it was just stars and breath clouds. Finally, Charlotte stood. I should get her home. She'll fall asleep in the car in 10 minutes, and I'll have to carry her in like a sack of potatoes. Eli chuckled. Bet she still calls you Mama the Strong. Charlotte smiled. Only when I bribe her with marshmallows. She paused at the edge of the gravel, one hand on the car door. You're a good man, Eli. He didn't respond with a compliment or a joke. Just nodded, and you, he said, are one hell of a mother. She held his gaze for a beat longer than necessary, then got into the car. As the taillights disappeared down the road, Eli stood in the stillness, the weight of her story still warming the air between them. He didn't know where this road was leading, but for the first time in a very long time, he was ready to follow it wherever it went. The smell of garlic and brown butter filled the garage like a hymn. It was a scent Eli hadn't smelled in years, not since the days when his mother used to cook Sunday supper, and the neighborhood kids would linger around the windows, hoping for leftovers. Tonight, however, the scent didn't come from his own hands. It came from Charlotte. She moved through his tiny kitchen space with unexpected ease. Sleeves rolled up an apron borrowed from a dusty hook in the corner. Eli had offered to help, but she waved him off. You fix engines, I fix pasta, she said, flashing a grin that held no trace of corporate bravado. Maya sat at the workbench, turned dining table crayons, scattered before her, drawing what looked like a flying car with bunny ears. Every so often, she'd hold it up to Eli for inspection, and he'd nod solemnly as if evaluating blueprints for a NASA prototype. How's it coming? He asked. Needs more sprinkles, Maya declared. Sprinkles on a spaceship. She grinned. It's a dessert rocket. Eli chuckled and returned to slicing bread. He still wasn't used to this kind of noise. Happy noise. The laughter, the clatter of pots, the scrape of crayons on wood. It filled the cracks of his life in ways silence never had. Dinner was served on mismatched plates, pasta with a garlicky tomato sauce, a side of roasted carrots and bread. So crusty, Eli suspected Charlotte had taught herself to bake just to prove she could. They sat together, the three of them, beneath the hanging shop light over the bench. The food was good, really good. But what made it memorable wasn't taste, it was presence. You didn't have to cook, Eli said, wiping his mouth. I did, Charlotte replied. My mother used to say, feed the people you love, or at least the ones who've done something noble with a busted carburetor. Maya giggled mid-noodle. Eli glanced at her. You eat like you've been starved. She has, Charlotte said softly, half teasing. Hospital food is basically flavored sadness. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was full. After dinner, Charlotte helped clear the dishes and Maya curled up on the old armchair in the corner, pulling the worn quilt around her legs. She wasn't quite asleep, but her eyelids drooped with the slow grace of someone who finally felt safe. Eli leaned against the counter, drying a plate. She's different when she's here. Charlotte looked over. She told me yesterday this place makes her feel like she can breathe. She says a lot for a 7-year-old. She does. Charlotte agreed, but she doesn't say it easily, especially not after what happened. Eli placed the plate down carefully. You ever wish you could go back and make different choices? Charlotte didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up a dish towel and began drying the next plate. I used to think if I worked hard enough, I could outpace regret. She said buy enough property, build enough security, raise her in a fortress instead of a home. But the truth is, she glanced at Maya, she didn't need a fortress, she needed a dinner table. Eli nodded slowly. We all need a table, and someone who sees us without checking for a name tag. Charlotte added, the quiet between them wasn't empty. It was full of things neither needed to say out loud. As the night wore on, Charlotte finally scooped Maya into her arms, careful not to wake her. Eli opened the truck door, and she nestled the girl into the back seat. When she turned back to Eli, her expression had shifted. Not gratitude, not obligation, but something deeper. Thank you for letting us in, she said. Eli looked at her, voice low. You didn't need an invitation. You just showed up. She smiled. Sometimes that's the bravest thing we do. Before leaving, she pulled something from her coat pocket, a tiny folded note, and pressed it into his hand. For later, he watched as her taillights faded down the gravel road. The sound of tires on loose stone was the only noise for a while. Inside the garage smelled faintly of garlic crayons and something older like hope. Eli stood in the doorway for a long moment, then opened the note. It was written in blocky, uncertain letters. Dear Eli, thank you for fixing engines and hearts, love. Maya. His throat tightened. It was the kind of thank you no award could match. The kind of note that didn't just land in your hands, it took root in your ribs. And Eli Dawson, once a man defined by silence and solitude, realized that what they'd shared tonight wasn't just dinner. It was the start of something that looked a lot like family. It was nearly midnight when the phone rang. Not the cell. The landline, the dusty wall-mounted phone in the corner of the garage that hadn't made a sound in years. Eli had nearly forgotten it existed, buried beneath coils of extension cords and a calendar from 2016 that still showed a red circle around Dad's birthday. He was on the cot in the back room reading Charlotte's proposal again, under the dim yellow glow of a mechanic's lamp. The plan was solid, too solid, like something made for someone else's life. The phone rang a second time. He stood slowly, unsure if he was dreaming. By the third ring, he reached it. Yeah, he said, voice still thick with disbelief. A pause, then a voice clipped, professional, familiar in tone, if not in name. Mr. Dawson, this is Special Agent Harlan. We met briefly outside your garage. I flew in with the initial response team. Eli rubbed the back of his neck. You're calling now. I wouldn't, if it weren't urgent. Eli's gut tightened. Is it about Maya? No, she's safe. This is about her mother. Eli straightened. What happened? She's fine physically. But earlier this evening, Charlotte Lennox received a breach notification on one of her private security feeds. Someone tried accessing surveillance logs from the night of the crash. Eli's brow furrowed. What does that mean? It means someone wants to know exactly how Maya got out, where she went, who helped her. Eli's eyes narrowed. You think it's the man she mentioned, the one who tracked her? We suspect so. The digital fingerprints match activity from a known associate. He's careful, operates through proxies. But this wasn't random. Why are you telling me this? Eli asked. Because your name was flagged twice. Eli's heart slowed. What your GPS drop, your name in the hospital logs. And most recently, a social media post, someone snapped a photo of Maya holding your hand outside the hospital wing. It didn't go viral, but it was enough. Eli gritted his teeth. I didn't ask for any of that, I know. But now someone knows who you are. And if their intention is leverage, distraction, or harm, we can't be sure. Eli said nothing. Agent Harlan continued. We're recommending temporary relocation. Just a few days. Somewhere, secure. Charlotte's already been moved. She didn't say anything, Eli murmured. She didn't want to worry you, he sighed, pacing. I'm not some asset you can just pick up and move. Agent, I've got a life here. You have a garage and a cot, Harlan said plainly. You didn't have a life until Maya walked in. Don't lose it now. The line went quiet, then softer. You matter to them, Mr. Dawson. More than you think. Click. Eli stood still for a long moment. Then the sound of the wind picked up outside, whispers against the window glass. He turned off the lamp and stood in the darkness, staring at the proposal still open on the table. A page fluttered. Phase 1. Outreach. Ashford Community Mobile. Garage conversion. Skill training for veterans and low-income families. He could almost hear Maya's voice. You fix hearts too. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning he found Charlotte waiting by the back bay door, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Her posture rigid with restraint. Maya sat in the truck beside her, kicking her heels lightly against the dash, humming some unrecognizable tune. You should have told me, Eli said as he approached Charlotte. Took off the sunglasses. I didn't want to pull you into this. I was already in. She nodded. I know you, okay? He asked, shaken, but not broken. He looked at her, trying to read beneath the calm. You running again? Charlotte met his gaze. Not this time. Just repositioning and me. She pulled something from her pocket, a simple key fob. We bought the lot next door. Quiet purchase. No names attached. The team finished converting the back unit into a secured space. You'll still be in Ashford. Just watched over. Eli stared at the keys. I don't want bodyguards, you won't even see them, but they'll be there. For Maya too. She wants to come back next week. She wants to paint the side of your garage with stars. He allowed himself the flicker of a smile. I got a call, he said. I know. She replied. Harlan briefed me. I didn't like what he said. I didn't either. Eli stepped closer. You still want to build this thing? Even if it puts a target on your back, Charlotte didn't hesitate. Especially then, he let that settle between them. Then he reached out, and for the first time since this all began, he took her hand firm, steady, wordless. They didn't need to say what it meant. It was agreement, partnership, faith, and maybe something that hadn't yet found its name behind them. Maya leaned out the window. Can we have spaghetti again tonight? Eli laughed. Only if you promise no sprinkles this time. But it was space spaghetti, she protested. Charlotte turned to him. We're staying at the cabin. It's secure now. You could come by just dinner. Just normal, he nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. As the truck pulled away, Eli stood at the edge of his gravel lot, holding the key fob in one hand and the future in the other. The world had knocked again, and this time he wasn't going to pretend he didn't hear it. 6 months later, the garage looked nothing like it used to. The peeling Dawson's auto sign had been gently replaced with something hand-painted, wooden and warm. The Dawson Initiative, repairs with purpose. Underneath in smaller print, no one gets left behind. The inside still smelled like motor oil and old bolts. But now it also carried the scent of fresh coffee, cheap breakfast sandwiches, and sometimes even cinnamon rolls, courtesy of Maya, who had discovered the joy of a toaster oven and a dangerous affection for brown sugar. What once had been a cluttered sanctuary for one man was now a humming living space with purpose. The back bay had been converted into a workshop classroom. Veterans, former mechanics, even a few local teenagers on probation stood at their stations with greasy hands and cautious hope. There were no lectures, no uniforms, just work, honest, skilled, and healing in its own silent way. Eli walked through the space slowly, his worn boots echoing over the newly cleaned floors. He didn't say much, he never had, but people quieted when he passed, not from fear, from respect. They called him boss or Mr. D, or occasionally the guy who listens. He still didn't like the attention, but he understood now that sometimes the most powerful leaders are the ones who don't speak often, only when it matters. In the corner, a man named Felix, a former diesel tech who hadn't held a steady job in 5 years, was teaching a young woman how to change brake pads. She was listening closely, her hands shaking less than they did a month ago. Eli watched with quiet pride, not for himself, for them, for what this place had become. At the front desk, Charlotte was seated with her tablet scrolling through grant proposals. She looked more relaxed now. Her suits had softened into jeans and cardigans, her heels traded for boots. The sharp edges were still there, but now they framed something steadier, deeper. When she looked up and saw Eli, she smiled in a way that made him feel like coming home. Shipment from Denver just arrived. She said, more filters and the new lift for the wheelchair-accessible bay. Good, Eli nodded. We'll install it this weekend. Charlotte paused. You're really doing it. You know, doing what? Changing lives. You've already put 5 people back into full-time work, 2 kids off the streets, and somehow Maya's convinced half the county that our garage is where lost things get found. Eli chuckled. She's not wrong. He walked over and picked up a clipboard. Behind him, Charlotte added softly, including me. He stopped, letting the weight of her words settle. Then before he could speak, a small voice shouted from across the lot. Eli, come see. It was Maya. She was standing by the mural on the side wall, the one she had insisted on painting herself. It had started as a mess of stars and swirls, but over time, it evolved into something breathtaking. A mechanic's hand holding a wrench, cradling a heart in the palm. Above it, words in her neatest handwriting. Kindness repairs more than machines. Eli walked over. Maya was beaming. I finished it, she said proudly. He looked at the wall, then back at her. It's perfect, she pointed. That star right there. That's you, and that one's Mama. And the big one. She leaned in conspiratorially. That's Jasper. Eli swallowed a sudden lump in his throat. You gave me a safe place, Maya whispered. Now it's for everyone. He bent down and gave her a gentle hug. You gave it its heart. Behind them, Charlotte watched, arms folded, eyes soft. She didn't speak, didn't need to. She was watching something grow. Not a business, a home. That evening they gathered outside for the garage's first official community night. Folding chairs were set out. Strings of old Edison bulbs twinkled between two pine trees. Someone had brought a guitar. Another brought pie. Eli stood off to the side holding a paper plate and wondering when exactly this had become his life. Charlotte joined him, a cup of cider in her hand. Still thinking about escaping, she teased every 10 minutes. You won't, she said. He looked at her. No, I won't. They clinked cups from the back of the crowd. A grizzled vet named Martin raised his voice. Speech from the man who started it all. Eli shook his head. No way. Charlotte nudged him forward. Just a few words. Eli stepped up reluctantly. Everyone quieted. A dog barked once. Someone shushed it. Eli cleared his throat. I'm not one for speeches, he began. You all know that. A soft chuckle. He looked around at the faces marked by wear and wisdom, by second chances and long roads home. This place, he continued, started because a little girl walked into my garage. I didn't know it then, but she brought with her more than just a story. She brought purpose. And if you're standing here today, it means you brought some of that with you too. He paused. We fix cars here. But more than that, we fix the stories that brought people to the edge. We give folks a reason to stay. He looked over at Maya, who was grinning, and Charlotte, who was no longer just watching, but standing beside him. So thank you for showing up, for trusting this old garage, and for letting me believe. In people again. Applause rippled, sincere and warm. That night, under the stars and strings of light, Eli Dawson stood not as a mechanic or a recluse or a man marked by grief, but as the center of something true. The morning broke slow and golden dew clung to the pine needles like pearls. A low mist curled around the hills before lifting gently into a soft blue sky. In Ashford, Colorado, the world moved as it always had, unhurried, unnoticed by the noise of the wider world. But on the gravel lot just outside Eli Dawson's garage, something had shifted. Life had taken root. The doors to the garage were already open. The scent of fresh coffee drifted out, mixing with pine and sun-warmed metal. Someone had left a box of muffins on the front step. No note, but everyone knew it was from Mrs. Delaney up the road, who hadn't missed a Thursday delivery in months. Inside, Eli stood at the workbench, cradling a cup of coffee, watching Maya paint a fresh coat of green onto a battered toolbox. She wore overalls now, her curls pulled back in a loose ponytail, a smear of paint across her cheek. You missed a spot, Eli said. She stuck out her tongue without looking. I'm doing texture, of course, he said, nodding solemnly. Master artist at work, Charlotte appeared in the doorway behind them, carrying a folder and a gentle expression. Her business meetings were still happening, but now they came after pancake breakfasts and long walks through town. She had learned to leave her phone in the truck more often than not. I heard the mayor's office called again. She said third time this week, Eli replied. They want to name the park after us or something. You gonna say yes? He shrugged. I don't need a bench with my name on it. She smiled no. But you gave people a place to sit. That matters. They shared a long look, familiar now steady. A language of quiet gestures and the kind of trust that doesn't need labels. Maya hopped down from her stool and announced, I'm hungry. You're always hungry, Eli said. Because I'm growing, she replied proudly. Mama says I'm growing a big brain. Charlotte chuckled and tousled her daughter's hair. Let's go feed that brain. They walked down to the diner together where everyone knew their names, where the waitress didn't bother with menus, and where Maya got extra whipped cream without asking. After breakfast, they strolled through town. A veteran named Felix waved from his bike, his son trailing behind him on a scooter. Down the street, the garage's newest trainee, a young woman named Tara, was painting the front gate, a soft gray. It was subtle, but Eli saw it everywhere. People standing taller, eyes brighter, shoulders looser. Not because he was a hero, not because Charlotte was famous, but because something small, steady, and good had been allowed to grow. They walked up the hill just beyond town. From there you could see everything: the winding road, the edge of the forest, the humble heartbeat of Ashford. The wind carried the sound of a dog barking in the distance and someone hammering a loose fence post. Maya sat on the grass beside them, drawing in her sketchbook. She was sketching the garage with big windows and stars on the roof. Charlotte turned to Eli. She asked me yesterday if she could call this place home. Eli looked out over the valley. Isn't it already? Charlotte reached for his hand. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. I never expected any of this, she said. Neither did I, but I'm glad it happened here with you. Eli squeezed her hand gently. So am I. They sat like that for a long time, letting the quiet settle around them. Not as emptiness, but as peace. The kind that had taken a lifetime to find. The kind that comes not with fireworks, but with stillness. Down below the garage kept humming. A soft engine turned over. A child's laughter carried up the hill. The world moved on, and so did they, not away from what had been but forward into what could be. A mechanic, a mother, a child. Not just survivors of one strange, beautiful twist of fate, but builders of something greater. Something lasting. Something that would never quite fit in a headline, but would live in the hands. Hearts and quiet mornings of the people they'd come to love, and who had, against all odds, come to love them back. As the sun rose higher, Charlotte leaned her head against Eli's shoulder. Maya looked up from her sketch pad. This is the best day ever, she said simply. Eli smiled. It is. And for once, he didn't need to fix anything, because everything was exactly where it was meant to be. We'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching from? Did this story remind you of someone or perhaps a moment in your own life? If stories like this touch your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss a new tale. Your support means the world and helps us keep bringing more warmth and inspiration your way. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Until next time, take care, and remember, even the quietest acts of kindness can change a life.